So yeah, thank you for having me for in as a part of this study abroad week or fair. Um, my name is Grant Minagawa, and I'm the JET program coordinator at the Japanese consulate in Los Angeles for the Consulate General of Japan in Los Angeles. And I'm assuming that we all know why we're here, but if it wasn't clear earlier, I'm here to talk to you about the Japan Exchange and teaching program. So I'm just going to put our website in the chat too. I'll put this in a few times just as a reminder, but the most updated information can be found on our website. Our application is not available quite just yet, but it will be available towards the end of this month or early October. With a deadline in November for departure next year. So I'll go over more details about that later, but let's just kind of, I guess, get right into it because I know that we have to take some time for questions at the end. So we'll go through this first and then we'll cover the other stuff after. So again, my name is Grant Minagawa and I'm the JET program coordinator at the Consul General of Japan, Los Angeles. I'm originally from Hawaii and I was sent on the JET program to Okinawa Prefecture. So from an island to an island in 2010 to 2014. So I stayed on for 4 years too. So it is a little bit unusual to stay for 4 or 5 years, but it does happen. It's actually pretty common in certain places too. I think Okinawa, we had bragging rights of having like the largest number of recontracting jets up to 5th year or something. For the longest time, but I think most people stay on for maybe like 2 or 3 years. You can do as few as 1 year, but I think like you really get a much more enriching experience if you do stay on for another year or a year after that, just because you spend so much time at the beginning learning about the work and the expectations and really getting adjusted to living in the country. So yeah, we really recommend, or I personally really recommend staying for like 2 to 3 years at least and seeing where it goes from there maybe. I was an assistant language teacher. I'll get more into the positions later, but I was basically a teacher, an assistant teacher at 2 high schools in my first 2 years. And after my first 2 years, I moved into the prefectural office and I became a prefectural advisor. So I was sort of advising the other JET program participants, running orientations and seminars and things like that, and doing the sort of support side of the program to support the other participants that were there. So what is the JET program? As you saw in the first slide, JET stands for Japan Exchange and Teaching Program. So yeah, like a lot of people will think, oh yeah, it's that program where you teach English in Japan, and that's like 2 out of 3. But we do really like to emphasize the exchange component too, because you do get a lot of, it's really enriching in that sense as well, because yeah, you are teaching in the classroom, but you're also sort of sharing your culture, sharing your experience, learning from your students and people in your community as well. We sort of like to highlight this sort of mutual, like increasing of mutual understanding, grassroots internationalization, having those sort of one-on-one connections, those really personal connections with your students and your teachers and the other people that you're living and working side by side with in your community. So the JET program, started in 1987. So I'm assuming that it's older than like most, if not all of you. And it's been going on for more than 30 years. And so you can see sort of, like there's been sort of fluctuations, but there are thousands of people currently participating on the JET program from many, many different countries also. So it's not just English speaking countries. And it's a really, really international program. You'll be working side by side with people from other English speaking countries like Canada or the UK or Australia, New Zealand, people that are from maybe countries you wouldn't normally think of as English-speaking countries like Singapore or the Pacific Islands or the Caribbean. And also probably you'll have some non-English participants in your community as well. In Okinawa, we had 2 people from China, 1 person from Korea, and 1 person from Peru. I believe the Peruvian was the only Peruvian jet in the program, but you'll notice that there are people from all over the world that you'll be working side by side with on the JET program. So not only is it a great experience for people in the community to be exposed to a lot of different perspectives and cultures, but it's also a really great opportunity for participants themselves to network with other people and to make connections all over the world, really, too. So the JET program, I know we're here at a study abroad fair, but the JET program is a paid full-time job. So it's a little bit different from a study abroad or a volunteer opportunity. You are working, right? So you do need to have a bachelor's degree. I'll go into that in a second. So you do this after you finish your university, you graduate with your bachelor's degree. It is a paid full-time job. So you're going to school, you're teaching, and you're making a paycheck too. So like maybe this is a good alternative for if you maybe don't have enough time, maybe your course load is too crammed and you just need to graduate, or maybe if there's like, you know, other constraints, maybe financial constraints or other constraints that prevent you from studying abroad during this time while you're an undergrad. This is a great alternative to that. And you do get a lot of the same benefits of a study abroad too, because you are sort of immersed in the local culture. And I like to kind of think that you're maybe more immersed in the JET program because you're not a part of like this big study abroad cohort being in like downtown Tokyo or something like that. We send people all over the country. So you could be in a really, really rural prefecture, and you could be one of a few or maybe the only foreign person living in you and working in your community. So there's a lot of opportunities to really get immersed in the culture there. And it's also a really life-changing experience, I think, for everybody who goes through the program. You know, I think study abroad in general, I think, is a great life-changing experience. But you know, if you do the JET program and you're there for like 3 years or 4 years, like you can't not be changed. You know, your life can't not be changed by such a great and, you know, immersive and long-term experience as our program. So there are 2 positions in the JET program. There's an assistant language teacher, or an ALT, and there's a coordinator of international relations, or a CIR. I'll get into a little bit more detail with these 2 in a second here. So most of the people that go on the JET program participate as ALTs, assistant language teachers, and so you work in the public school system mostly. We do send a few people to the private schools, but for the most part, people work in local city or town board of educations, and they teach at elementary, junior high, or senior high school. Your sort of main responsibilities as working with a Japanese teacher of English, or a JTE, as the name of your position implies, you're an assistant teacher. So you're working with those JTEs, as we call them, to plan lessons, to conduct lessons, to be in the classroom interacting with the students. And sort of the other side to it too, that going back to the program, right, Japan Exchange and Teaching, the exchange side of it too is that you're there to kind of motivate the students. You're there as like an example of an American, an example of a native English speaker, an example of a foreign person in general. And you're there to kind of like inspire students to want to learn more about other countries and other cultures. You're sharing your culture with them. You know, you're learning about Japan and Japanese culture from them too, and you can create a lot of opportunities having those one-on-one interactions. And so the responsibilities could vary a little bit based on the level of the school you're working at, the number of classes you teach, the sort of relationship and expectations that your JTs have of their ALT. And so those will differ. Obviously, if you're teaching elementary school, you're probably not getting students ready for university entrance or study abroad or things like that, just because they're probably just too young, right? But if you're at a high school, you know, you're probably not doing little songs and dances with your students, right? So the expectations are going to be a little bit different. For a CIR, this position does require some Japanese language proficiency. If you're familiar with, if any of you are taking Japanese class right now and you're familiar with the Japanese language proficiency test, or the JLPT, you would need to be around an N1 or N2 level, which is basically like sort of having a working fluency with the language. You don't need to hold the certificate, but you need to be around that level. And as you can see, it's because most of the job involves translation and interpretation. That's like one of the main responsibilities here. So they're working mostly in international exchange offices. So they might be working at a city, they might be working for the prefecture, but they're working in an international exchange office to do international relations, as the name would imply. So you're translating, interpreting, you might be translating documents, tourism pamphlets or brochures or signage to attract tourists to your community. You might be translating official documents for people that are, you know, maybe Americans or English speakers that are living in your community. You might be translating for the mayor or the governor of your prefecture when they meet international guests. You know, there's a lot of different things involved here, in addition to planning international events or doing presentations in the community as well. I think that's a little bit more broad of a sort of set of responsibilities than you have as an ALT here, but it really depends on the kind of office that you're placed at as well. So typically JETs work for about 35 hours per week, 7 hours a day, 5 days a week. The hours might vary depending on the sort of responsibilities or the workload that you have. At least 10 days of paid vacation, and you also get Japanese national holidays, which come out to about like one holiday every month or so. You do have some blocks of holidays with like Golden Week and the end of the year, sort of the New Year sort of holiday as well. And so, you have a lot of opportunities to travel around and to use the time you have while you're there on the other side of the, well, not quite the other side of the world, but almost might as well be the other side of the world to travel around Japan and travel around Asia as well. As you can see from this slide, the salary does increase the longer you stay on the program. So each year that you recontract for the program, you will get like a little bump up in the salary. I know that this is a little bit difficult to understand here, but basically, if you think of it as 100 yen to the dollar, you could just subtract 2 zeros and stick a dollar sign in front of that, and that's basically more or less, right, with the exchange rate changing. That's more or less what it would equate to in US dollars. And so that might not sound like a whole lot to some of you, especially with the high cost of living that we have here in Southern California. But it is a pretty livable wage, and it's sometimes more than what the teachers make in Japan too. So the JETs are pretty well paid, and you can use that money towards paying back student loans or traveling or doing whatever you want with it as well. We do also cover your transportation to and from Japan. There's an orientation when you arrive in Tokyo. And so we get you from here. If you're applying from our consulate in Los Angeles, you depart from LAX, go to Tokyo, have the orientation there, travel to your prefecture, and then once you're done with the program, you're able to come back to, and it covers coming back here to California as well. Housing is not included with your as part of your salary. It really varies from location to location. Some Board of Educations do have teacher housing, or they have some sort of subsidy, but it's something that you can work out later once you're placed with what we call a contracting organization, which would be your employer. You're also enrolled in Japanese health insurance, so that's it's pretty comprehensive coverage. It's really good in case you get sick or anything happens while you're in Japan as well. And of course, the consulate takes care of the visa paperwork and all that sort of thing, since you are applying through the consulate too. So in order to apply for the JET program, you do need to be a U.S. citizen to apply through the U.S. JET program. As you saw in the link that I put in there, it's the JET program USA. So that's run by the Embassy of Japan in Washington, D.C. But if you're not a US citizen, as you saw in my previous slide, there are many other countries that are participating in the program too. So you would just need to go to the country of your citizenship and apply there. I'm going to drop a link into the chat here, and this is a link to a list of all the different Japanese foreign missions all over the world. So if you're not American, you can check that website out and find links to the JET program in those areas too. So, and then also, as I mentioned before, you do need to hold a bachelor's degree before you depart for Japan. That means that you can actually, if you are a senior now, you could actually apply now. The application will be available this fall. And then once you graduate, either at the end of this semester or the end of next semester, you can just send us a proof of your graduation, and that then you're good to go. It doesn't matter what degree, as long as you have a bachelor's degree. You don't need to be you don't need to be an education major. You don't need to be a Japanese major. It's open to all sort of majors, as long as you hold a bachelor's degree before departure. Because you would be living in a place that maybe doesn't have the same level of support that you're used to here in the US, much less having that support in English. We do ask for people to be in good mental and physical health, because you might need to be on your own a little bit. You might need to find those services in a more rural area or something. These next ones I'll kind of breeze over here, but basically, if you've done the program before, if you've lived in Japan before, there are some stipulations there. But also, sort of to be eligible for the program and to be a teacher of English, we do ask that you have naturally excellent written and verbal English skills, because you'd be teaching English or translating documents to English. as an American JET participant and a representative of the US. And of course, because you would be living and working in Japan for at least 1 year, we do ask that you have a strong interest in Japan and Japanese culture. You don't need to be an expert in anything. You don't have to have taken judo for 5 years or have played the like taiko drums or something like that. Just be interested and willing to learn more about Japan and Japanese culture. Of course, for CIRs, you do need to have the Japanese language skills as well. So the application timeline here. So the application becomes available in late September or early October. You would apply in, and the same sort of timeline is true from year to year, more or less. It had fluctuated for the past couple of years with the Olympics, but we're back to a normal quote unquote time schedule now. So the application every year opens in the fall, and you're able to apply at that time. It's an online application, and the deadline is usually around the middle of November. I don't know when the actual deadline for this year is yet, but you have time to get together the application. It's a pretty extensive application. We do ask for transcripts, we ask for letters of recommendation. There's a lot of supporting documents that you would need to submit as well, but it's an online application. So it's so much easier than when Eileen and I applied. We had to mail packets of papers to Washington, DC. So you guys have it much easier these days. You just scan and upload documents and you're done. So the deadline is in the middle of November, and then after that time, the Embassy of Japan will review the applications that they've received, and in early the next year, you'll find out if you make it to the next round, and you'll be invited to interview. If you interview with our office, then you'll be invited to interview in Los Angeles, and interviews take place in late January or early February. And so after that happens, it'll go through another process, and it will get reviewed another time by the Tokyo side of the program. And yeah, faxing is a thing that you also need to do when you go to Japan too. I had to learn how to use a fax machine when I went there. It's a little bit surprising, I think, the level of technology in some of the schools. But yeah, so so they'll get reviewed in Japan, and you'll find out the results in April usually. Whether you are accepted or put onto a wait list, or unfortunately not accepted to the program, you'll find that out in April. And then there'll be some further documents that we'll need to collect at that time to make sure that you're still interested in the program. We need to make sure that you don't have a criminal background, or you make sure you're healthy to participate in the program. Some other documents like that. You'll get your placement. We'll do some orientations for you. And our departure for Los Angeles is at the end of July. Some other locations depart in early August, but yeah, if you want to know the latest, please check out our website again. And you can see that at the bottom there, jetprogramusa.org. And so that's basically my presentation. I'll leave this slide up for now, I guess, to have my contact info up there. That phone number goes to our office, and that email goes directly to me. So if you have any questions, please feel free to email our office or anything too. And I guess we can open the floor to questions. And I know I'm like a minute or so over time, but if we have any questions, how are we doing that?
You're actually doing really well on time. So we have plenty of time for questions, I think. And I don't have to jump to another session. This is my last session of the day, so I can stick around.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah. All right. Well, any questions in the chat? So far, nothing yet. Oh, someone has a question. Can we start in the spring?
Unfortunately, no. Well, it is maybe possible, but it's very, very unusual to have a spring start. When you apply in the fall, you can indicate that you'd be willing to accept an early departure. So that would be a departure in usually April, or they say anytime between April and the regular departure date. Those are not guaranteed though, and we only send a very small group of people every year. So you can indicate that you'd be interested in doing that, but it's in my experience, it's very unusual to have spring departures. I think most people will depart in the summer.
One question is, how beneficial would you say JET is for anyone aspiring for careers in Japan?
Well, I think it's immensely beneficial. Not only, I mean, just for the sole fact of having a foot in the door and being there, you'll kind of find that there's so many opportunities that you have to actually be there for. Like things will come up, you never know where things are going to take you, but being in Japan where things are happening, if you want to be in Japan, getting to Japan is like one of the biggest hurdles because of visas. Like you can't just go there and move to Japan. You can't just decide to do that, right? So being accepted to this program, you do have your responsibilities as an ALT, but having the time, being in the country, you have all your free time you have to look for other opportunities as well. A lot of people do find jobs and stay in Japan. Of course, if you are, of course, it kind of depends on what kind of career you're looking for too. If you want to work with Japanese and the Japanese language and be doing translation or something, for example, there's no better place to get practice in the language than to be there. You can study there, you can study anywhere really, but only in Japan can you just, walk outside of your apartment and need to use the language immediately, like right outside of your apartment or something. So, it's great for learning the Japanese language, building the experience of, being able to say that you live there, but also like it's just, I think not only for Japan related careers, but just in general too, like there's a lot of experience that you can gain from the program. And you're not just teaching, right? You're gaining public speaking, you're gaining complex problem solving skills, you're gaining team working skills, you're getting organizational skills, all of those sorts of things too, in addition like to everything else that I talked about before. If you want to teach English, of course, this is a great experience, but there's also a grant program to get TEFL certified while you're on the program as an ALT. And if you want to take the JLPT, there's a grant program to reimburse you for the cost of taking the test too, if you want to get your certification for being proficient in the Japanese language.
Okay. We have another question, but to that point as well, I just wanted to add too, is that when you are working in Japan, you have the ability to have references, Japanese references, who are going to be able to speak to your ability to work. And that matters a lot in Japan. So that's you're going to network a lot when you're a JET. So that's another added benefit to being there if you want to work there. One other question following that is, very common one, do I need to have teaching experience for JET?
No, you don't. We don't require any teaching experience. Like I said before, you don't need to be like an education major. You don't have to have any prior experience, but of course, it's very, very, very helpful. It is a pretty competitive program. And of course, because, when you apply for a job, right, you need to kind of show the hiring people why you're a good fit for that job. So if you have any experience teaching, that's great. If you have any experience tutoring, that's great. If you have any experience working with children in general, that's really great. You could also, if you don't have teaching experience, you can highlight any experience working with people in a greater capacity. Like if you and volunteer experience we shouldn't rule out volunteer experience too, because that's also really great to have. You don't need to have paid teaching experience, right? You could have volunteer tutoring experience, volunteer teaching experience, teaching assistant experience. Anything is great, but we don't require any teaching experience. I would recommend that if you're not quite ready to apply this year, maybe take some time to find a volunteer opportunity or find somewhere where you can gain some experience teaching or something like that.
Okay. Next question was, if we apply for a CIR, we wouldn't need the certification of language. We just need to have the specific language skills, correct?
Yes, you don't need to have the JLPT certificate to apply for CIR. There is a test that you can take, I think, on the application itself. There's like a 5-question test or something, and if you can go through these Japanese questions and write and get the correct answers, then you're probably around that level. And of course, if you've completed several years of Japanese studies and you think you're at that level, you can also, you're free to apply. But of course, you will be tested. If you make it to an interview, we will need to make sure that you are able to you are proficient in the language to a certain extent. So, you please feel free to apply, but just understand that we will need to make sure that you are able to fulfill your duties as a CIR. If you don't have a JLP certificate, or either way, actually, if you have a certificate or not, we'll be checking to make sure you're able to fulfill your responsibilities as a CIR.
Are there any other questions anyone wants to ask?
Yeah, so it's open to, again, it's open to all majors, and I think it also, I wouldn't say having a specific major, even a technical major, rules you out from the program. Like your degree is a degree, right? I mean, it's sort of like how you use your degree or what experience you get while you're in your program that matters, I think, more. Like someone wrote here about having a mechanical engineering degree. And so, like maybe you have a mechanical engineering degree, but you were volunteering to help your classmates, tutoring, or maybe being a TA for underclassmen or something, and you have that experience. Like that's great. Like I've seen from both sides of the program, being on the professional advisor side and being here, we see biology majors, we see chemistry majors. One of my friends from the program was a German major. I see engineering all the time, computer science, art, psychology, really everything. Of course, education, Japanese as well. I was a business major. I don't think that there's any let's not label ourselves by our majors, right? So it's really how what you take from that degree and how you use it, and what other experience do you have too, right? Like if you have, even if you're an engineering major, you took Japanese language, or you've studied abroad, to plug the study abroad programs. Having study abroad experience is great too, because it shows that maybe you didn't study abroad in Japan, but you're able to live in another country, right? Maybe you lived in Europe, or you lived in Korea, or you lived in China or something, and that shows that you're able to be outside of your comfort zone. You were outside of your familiar, like, friend and family network. You had to you had to find a place to live. You had to get set up. You had to deal with people that don't speak your language, right? So having study abroad experience is also really great. Yeah, I think it's more about less about the name of your major and what you did while you were in university. Yeah.
One thing to add to that too is that it doesn't take into consideration what your hobbies are too. So a lot of that exchange component happens outside of the classroom. So you might be expected to stay and become like a club organizer. Like all of a sudden you are now organizing the baseball club or the soccer club or the basketball club, or you are now being asked to join the music club, and whatever your hobbies are, that might translate to it as well. And even if you're using, like, for example, the example here is mechanical engineering, like you might find that some other teacher, not even your JTE, comes up to you and goes, will you put together an experiment or something, or showcase something for our cultural week? Or, because that's one of the annual events is Bunkasai, where, you put things together and shows and demonstrations. So you need to be creative. That's probably the only thing I would suggest that you need to have or start to build, is your sense of creativity with how you can apply your skills in a transferable way to Japanese students.
Yeah, along those lines too, going into hobbies and things, I think it's really great when you're applying for the job to kind of showcase the sort of things that make you original and unique, and those hobbies are definitely one of them. Hobbies, skills, interests, experiences that you have, right? Like I said, study abroad earlier, having Japanese language ability. But even if you don't have Japanese language ability, if you speak like Italian or Korean or like or Thai or something, right, shows that you can learn another language. You're not gonna like struggle maybe as much as people who've never studied a language before. If you can play guitar or an instrument, or you play soccer, like then that opens up the doors to other opportunities to being maybe an assistant coach on the soccer team, or maybe playing music in class. Like all sorts of things, really. Whatever your interests are, I think those are great things to showcase as well. And also in terms of to answer this question here about learning Japanese, I mean, I don't know about the best way to learn Japanese, and I think a lot of it too has to do with your own initiative, right? Like you're not for any of you who have studied abroad before, you probably know as well that you don't just like arrive in the foreign country and start downloading the language automatically, right? Like it doesn't work like that. You don't come back and, I mean, like if you've studied abroad, right, you come back from your study abroad and everybody's like, oh, are you fluent? Are you fluent? But it doesn't automatically happen like that, right? You do need to put in some effort to study the language too. So you can, on one hand, you could go there and have no interest, have no interest, no initiative, be really lazy about it, have all kinds of, just hang out with ALTs or foreigners, not study anything at all, and have like the barest elementary level grasp on the language, or maybe almost nothing at all. On the other hand, you could, be here and really dedicate yourself and study every day and have flashcards and language exchange partners over Zoom or things like that. You could become fluent, like just, never having set foot in the country. So I wouldn't say I wouldn't say best in any way, but I think you definitely have a lot of opportunities. The program does also have a Japanese language course it doesn't lead directly to a JLPT certificate, but it's great to kind of keep you on your toes and keep you going with sort of regular sort of deadlines and regular lessons, because it is a little bit hard to sort of structure your learning when you're there, just because you don't have like a textbook and you're not, you don't come into school in November and okay, it's time to learn about holidays, and your brain starts downloading, like the vocabulary for that or something. So we do have a language course as well. And of course, if you do want to get JLPT certified for N1, N2, or N3, those really actually N1 or N2 are the ones that will help you find jobs later on, going back to that earlier point. But yeah, and of course, like I said before, being immersed in the culture, having to use it once you step out of your apartment, if you need to talk to your landlady, or you need to go to the convenience, or you need convenience store, or you need to go, anywhere really, you'll be using the language. And so it's a really great way to focus on Japanese and to improve your Japanese ability, and to have people all around you who can listen to your pronunciation and correct you, and you can listen to their pronunciation and learn from that. But I wouldn't say best in any way, but yeah, it is really great, I think, to study the language while you're there. It's a really good opportunity, and I think it would be a really missed opportunity if you chose not to, maybe while you're there. But yeah, among many other things, I think it's a great opportunity to learn the language.
Grant, I have a question that was sent directly to me. So I'm going to ask this question, and then I'm going to have to take off because I've got to do some advising. And
Okay.
so the question is, I plan on completing my bachelor's degree in spring 2022, but will continue for a semester or two to complete my minor. Will I still qualify in applying for the JET program after a semester or two after having my bachelor's?
Yes. So yeah, basically there's no, you don't have to apply for it right after you finish college. You can wait a couple of years. You could go start a career and then realize that you really should have actually done this program before and go back to it later. That's totally fine. But you just need to have a bachelor's degree. Like we need to have either like a copy of a diploma or a final transcript that says that the degree was conferred by the time you would be ready to go in the program. So I'm not sure how minors and continuing things work, but if you have your paper that says you've received a bachelor's in, sorry to go back to that same example over and over again, but a bachelor's in mechanical engineering conferred on this day, May 16th, 2022 or something like that, then you're good to go. And if you do want to continue your minor, you are able to do that virtually, and you are able to fulfill your responsibilities as an ALT while you do that, I mean, I guess that would be okay too. But I would really focus on the job for the first like maybe semester or two while you're there, and then I think, but it is possible. I think it is also possible to continue your education and to do your graduate school and to do other things. I've known Jets who've done that while they're on the program. Again, you don't have to do it right away. You can spend some time doing other things, pursuing other opportunities, and you can always revisit it later. Yeah.
To help to that point too, not only do you meet people from different countries being Jets, you meet Jets who are different ages. So there are people who are Jets who are in their 30s who apply for Jet. And so that to give you a sense of like when in this spectrum you can kind of apply to. I don't know, Grant, is there still an age limit to when they can apply? But just to kind of give a sense, like you don't have to be fresh from college to qualify to apply for Jet.
Yeah, there's no age limit, but we do it was conceived as sort of like a youth exchange, and the majority of people who apply are younger people. So just because having the time to commit 1 to 5 years is not a thing that most people can do. But you do see people that are older on the program as well. I was just told by the New York consulate that they're sending 2 people in their 60s onto Jet this coming, actually tomorrow is their departure date. So they're actually sending 2 people in their 60s, which was kind of like amazing to me. I was like, oh wow, I've never heard of that before. But yeah, so there's no age limit. Yeah, you can apply anytime, but of course, if you're going as a 60-year-old, you're going with kids that could be your grandchildren as well, right? So you'll be teaching kids that would be your grandchildren, and I think it is a lot easier, for younger people to develop a stronger connection with their students because you're closer in age and stuff. Maybe sometimes a little bit too close in age. If you just graduated from university and you're teaching high school, like you might only have a 4-year difference with your students. But yeah, I think it's easier for them to get closer to you. I think if you're like closer to their age, because like if you're 60 something, you're older than all the JTEs that you work with. So it might be harder. Like you might struggle a little bit more to develop those connections. But yeah, there's it is easier, I think, if you're the younger you are, probably to develop those connections with your students and stuff too. But again, there's no age limit. Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and transfer host abilities to you, Grant. You've got another question, but it was so nice catching up and seeing everybody in this session. If you have any questions, I'm on campus. Feel free to let me know what questions you have. And of course, Grant is here as well. So please go ahead and stick around for your questions, but I'll transfer it to him.
Should I turn off the recording then, or should we just keep it going until I'm?
Just keep it going because we'll trim it. We can fix it.
Oh, okay. Okay, great.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, thank you. Let's see. So there's another question about the grade levels. So it really depends, I think, on the contracting organization that you're placed with. We do have Jets working in, it's basically the K-12 range. So it's elementary, junior high school, and senior high school. If you are working for a local board of education, it's usually a combination of elementary and junior high school. If you're working for a professional board of education, that usually means you're working with high school. You don't really get a chance to specify what grade levels you want to teach at in the application itself. But if you do have some strong sort of reasoning for wanting to be in one grade level or another, and you do have sort of like the backing to prove it, like maybe if you want to teach in elementary school and you sort of like helped to raise your younger cousins or something growing up and you did a lot of babysitting or something, maybe you could say that you have a lot of experience working with younger students. Or maybe if you were if you're a teaching assistant on campus and you worked with mostly older students, maybe you can say that you have a good rapport with older students based on your experience, and you want to be able to share that and apply that towards your time on the JET program too. So I think it's all a matter of the way that you sort of market yourself, but really being open to any kind of experience too would be really useful too. Let's see. So as far as the JET program goes, you're placed in the sort of K-12 range. So you're either at elementary, junior, or senior high school. So you don't get placed at anywhere to work with adults. But there are opportunities outside of school. I had some friends who had sort of inherited from their predecessors a sort of conversation circle of like 10 to 12 people or something, and they're just like random older folks in the community, and they had been getting together for years with the previous ELTs and the ELTs before them and the ELTs before them, and they and so they just wanted to get together and they wanted to practice speaking English, and so you can find opportunities like that, I think, in the community as well. Sometimes it might take a little bit more initiative to get something like that started. Maybe your teachers at your school want to learn English or something, or they want to practice their English. Like I was talking with somebody earlier, and I feel like there's always sort of like this closeted, like really good at English teacher that's like some random other, other specialty. Like when I was at my school, there was a PE teacher who was like basically fluent in English, and he really, it's like, where do you come from, kind of thing. So like there's people like that, I think, in the community as well, like people who can speak really good English, and there's opportunities I think you can find to do that, but the program itself will place you in a school. So your main responsibility would be teaching students. Are there any other questions? I think that was just about it, and we are about 15 minutes over time here. So I think if that's okay with everybody else, unless there's any questions, and if there's any questions later, again, please feel free to email or contact us. We do have more events like this going forward. I'm putting that in the chat as well. Our consulate, our office is also hosting some other info sessions. If you'd like to join some later on in the cycle, we'll have more information about more specific information about the application process. Or if you want to hear more about this program, I have a longer presentation that I didn't really go into a lot of detail today. The meeting recordings of these meetings, I think Eileen mentioned it at the beginning of this presentation. I think you can find that through the university. So I'm not really sure how that works, but through the website that you signed up for this presentation or you logged into this presentation, I think that's where you can find a recording of this session and others that were part of this study abroad week. But if you want to learn more about the JET program itself, please feel free to email or contact us. You can find my contact information on that link that I put into the chat as well. So yeah, thanks for coming to this session. Hope to see some of you applying this year or next or sometime in the future. And have a good rest of your day and have a good weekend. Thank you.